Saludos. Welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We have been covering Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 plus years. Today, we're going to cover individuals with the last name is E, as in Edward. I want to first start off with Envidia. You may have heard of this person or know somebody like this. They are resentful with jealousy and a strong desire to possess the same thing they have worked so hard for. Basically, hater status. I was once told the story about cockroaches, that if you put them inside of a glass, they can't get out because as soon as they try to climb up and get out of their situation, other cockroaches pull them down. I've seen on this channel that often people seem to be like these cucarachas, just hating on me and this channel and on other people and on other channels over some real petty stuff. Now, this doesn't mean that people shouldn't weigh in when they have something besides their personal opinions to back up and respectfully contest certain things that are said or done. But it is evident to me that there's a lot of people with La Envidia who really don't have the huevos to start their own channel and see how hard it is to do this. I'm talking about a small percentage. And I know many of you say just ignore those haters, but I constantly have to block people like this. And I'm sure they don't just do it on YouTube. They probably do it when they encounter anybody who is trying to do something positive and they have nothing better to do than throw their negative opinion all over it. Anyways, today we'll start off with David Big D Eaton, who is from San Francisco. He had a B number, so likely was made MA sometime in the late 1970s to early 80s. I understand he was a big dope dealer, and being that he was from San Fran, was probably close to Mike Aicha Ison. He was released a few times, came back on the H number, was housed at San Quentin in 1990, was paroled again, and then came back on a K number. Last I checked, he was out of custody as 2012, and I lost track of him after that. Kurt, a.k.a. Stump, L.A., as in E-H-L-E, had a B number. He was housed at Chino CIM in 1967, and I believe was made MA by at least 1970. He was paroled and had a few parole violations. Evidently, his B number ran out, and he was sent to the feds in 1978 at McNeil Island State Prison in Washington State, where I've noted before there was quite a few Mexican Mafia members housed, and I knew the guy who ran the Pinto program at El Centro de la Raza in Seattle and was associated with Texas Syndicate out of Austin, Texas. He recruited inmate visitors to go to McNeil Island, as well as places like the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, to spend some time in the visiting room with Mexican Mafia members and associates, and to carry messages. And I know for a fact that some of them introduced contraband. By that, I mean keistered in dope to these guys, like Jimmy Joe Lucero. I might have to do a total episode on that whole ordeal. Anyways, Stump ended up being released from the feds, caught a C number in 1980, and then was released again and went back to the feds on a bank robbery in 1981. I lost track of him after that, but he would be an old man right now if he was still alive, being in his late 70s. Richard Elias, I believe, was from Primera Flats. I only based that on, I had an MA associate by the name of Robert Chito Elias out of Primera Flats, who had a B number and date of birth not too far away from Richard. Richard appeared on a MA membership list in the mid-1970s. But like I said before, this is before there was official validation by CDC or the federal BOP, which didn't happen to the late 1970s. Corwin Sloppy Elmore was from Planton. He was an MA member in the 1970s and was involved in the murder of Joe Caballero and Natalie Luna in September 1976. He was also involved in the murder of a TS member named Martin Lopez on June 9, 1981 at Folsom Prison. As you recall me saying in earlier episodes, the Texas Syndicate ended up joining the Nuestra Familia and groups like Familia Cinco and some of the Maravillas in resisting the Mexican Mafia in the late 1960s through early 70s. There then was a split in the Texas Syndicate. Some stayed loyal to Nuestra Familia, and some aligned themselves, like Panchito Gonzalez, aligned with the Mexican Mafia. I show Sloppy was housed at the LA County Jail in 1977 and was back at Folsom in 1981. I forget what happened to him after that. As you can imagine, this is a lot of stuff to remember and keep track of. I will mention an individual here named Tony Weasel Endicott. who had a brother who was an MA associate. I had Weasel at New Folsom Violence Control Unit in 1991. I recall him very well because he had got upset one day and put his fist through the supposedly unbreakable glass in the front of his cell. Weasel was from Paris, which is in the Inland Empire over by Lake Elsinore, and was associated with Aryan Brotherhood member Renegade Yandel, who I also had at New Folsom Prison, but at B facility. Renegade is currently housed at New Folsom. Manuel, the Mad Korean, or the Killer Korean in Nerva, was from San Diego. I think he may have been half Mexican. I went overseas to Korea when I was in the Marines, and Nerva does not sound like a Korean name. He had an A number and was made MA in the late 1960s. He was involved in a homicide at DVI and an attempted escape. He was housed at San Quentin in 1971, where I understand he was close to Mundo Mendoza. Nerva ended up going into WITSEC in 1975 and ended up disappearing from the scene. Mark, big boxer, Enriquez Olmos, was from Arta. I think he may have only been an MA associate and died in 2007. He had a C number. Rene Boxer Enriquez Olmos had a big old Arta across his abdomen and a famous black hand across his heart. He had C number 35352 and was made MA in the 1980s at Folsom Prison. He caught a robbery case in 1981 and was first housed at Soledad. He then went to San Quentin in 1982 and DVI in 1984. He then was shipped to Folsom Prison in late 1984, where he was sponsored into the MA by Black Dan Varela and Corwin Sloppy Elmore, who I just mentioned. Boxer was involved in the October 1986 riot at Folsom Prison. He was then shipped to Tehachapi and paroled in 1988. He caught a parole violation in 1989, but was soon released. He then caught 2 murder cases in 1990, whereby he was involved in a hit on David Loco Gallegos and Cynthia Gavaldon. David had been running as a renegade and dealing dope without kicking back to the MA, and I understand Cynthia was hanging around him. Let me know if you heard a different story on that. Once convicted of those murders, Enriquez came back with an H number, 69471. He then was even more involved in MA politics than he was before.
The Mexican Mafia was engaging in conflict in the state prisons and the county jails throughout the state of California. This was directed by the Mexican Mafia, and the Sureños were perpetrating the violence. At a specific point in time, the hierarchy in the Mexican Mafia started directing Sureños on the streets, not only through beatings in parks when they started their horizontal integration into society in 1992, but later, about 10 years later, in 2002, Mexican Mafia members were directing gang members to target blacks. Look at Florencia, look at Avenues, look at all these gangs who were targeting a specific race for assassination, for exclusion from the neighborhood. I mean, these are hate crimes.
I actually got word from a correctional officer at the facility where Boxer was being housed in February 2002 that he didn't come out with the rest of the carnales like he had been. Like I said, I got eyes and ears everywhere, both inside and outside, both active and retired. But officially, I believe Boxer's debrief paperwork reads May 22nd. I believe Boxer's debrief was mainly handled by my friend and one of CDC's best, Investigator Devin Hawks. And I don't want to put words in his mouth because I respect him way too much. But as I recall, he questioned Boxer's sincerity about getting out of the game because I think he knew how manipulative he was and how well entrenched he had been in Mexican Mafia politics for many years. When I told a member of the California task force about this, I remember him saying, nobody's supposed to know about that. And I couldn't help but smile a little bit because this individual later on then badmouthed me and said I didn't know anything about gangs and was no gang investigator. When in fact, I validated over 10,000 gang members or security threat group members at the King County Jail from 1994 when I transferred a corrections officer into the classification unit and was immediately assigned as being the security threat group coordinator to meet with all Washington State police gang units and correctional intel units to share information on these individuals. I then promoted to a classification supervisor spot about 2013 and continued doing this work until I left the jail in 2016. In other words, over 22 years working as a gang specialist. This to me was another classic example of somebody who has envidia. Anyways, after he dropped out, Boxer was housed in Lancaster. Understand he was pulled out for a little fishing adventure around 2006. those of you who know what I'm talking about may be chuckling right now. But yeah, what do I know? He was held at Lancaster for many years and then transferred to Ironwood State Prison. Another interesting fact about Boxer was he actually was very involved with the pesetas, which are Mexican Mafia dropouts, the vast majority being the former associates of the MA, but was told he was messing up. Understand that his son was killed in Las Vegas. I wouldn't wish that on nobody, having lost family members myself. I got so much more I could say about Boxer. I did put out a video on him when he got released, if you want to see it. Daniel Bandit Enrique Sanchez was from White Fence. I also had him at New Folsom Prison, and he was housed at Tehachapi in 2012, but I show is no longer in custody. Philip, a.k.a. Gibby, also Gibby Escobar, was from Norwalk. He had a D number and was made MA, but I believe was green-lighted in the mid-90s for refusing to do a hit on Sleepy Aragon, who also refused to do a hit on him. So both appeared on the MA hit list. Richard Chino Escobedo, I think, may have been from Hazard. He was involved in a murder on Tuffy Torres in October 1976, who I believe was ordered killed by Champ Reynoso in retaliation for Champ's brother being killed. Hazard has a long history of being a hazard, but actually it's named after a mayor of Los Angeles, not because it's so dangerous. A lot of people don't know that. Ronnie Escobedo was from the San Gabriel Valley. He had an A number, and I show was MA in the late 1960s through 70s. He paroled in June 1975, and I lost track of him after that. Alfonso Mono Esparza was from Maravilla and also had some ties to San Francisco. He had an A number and was listed on the MA card in the mid-1960s. He remained involved in the organization through the 1970s and even had associations with Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano in the late 1970s. Alex Espinosa was from Rancho San Pedro. He had an A number and hit CDC in the late 60s and was MA by the mid-70s. I understand he overdosed and died in the late 1970s. Johnny Espinosa was from Beaumont. He had a C number and was made MA sometime in the 1980s to 1990s, but I lost track of him. Jose Papas Espinosa, I believe, was from West Covina, but I also have notes that had been seen in Pomona. He had a D number and was made MA by 1987. He remained involved with the organization at Corcoran State Prison, paroled in 1990, came back and was housed at Salinas Valley State Prison in 1997, but paroled in 2003, and I lost track of him after that. I mentioned Crazy Rudy Espuro when I did the San Diego MA episode. He was from Escondido, and I recall hearing a presentation where he was schooling camaradas on what it takes to be a camarada. He would know since he was once a camarada before he was made a carnal. He had an H number, was housed at Pelican Bay in 2000, and was arrested in January 2012 on a federal case, and is currently held at the Florence ADX. He is not scheduled for release until 2042. Alfredo Vago Estrada was from Fort Mara and had an early B number, and had a half-brother who was also MA. He was made MA in the early 60s when he would have been in his 30s, which was relatively old for a Mexican Mafia member back then, except for maybe Joe Morgan, who was made in the late 60s. Vago was one of the participants in the Shoe War of 1968, and I'm not sure when he died. Arthur Tudi Estrada was from Cuca. I understand he was a big Dallas Cowboys fan and a very good boxer. Tudi had a C number. He was sponsored by none other than Güero Buff at Tehachapi in the late 1980s, but at first that was not recognized by individuals like Henry Indio Carlos from El Sereno. So Tudi had a rough going at first in his Emory career. I had him at New Folsom Segregation in 1988. He was then shipped to Pelican Bay when it opened in 1989. He paroled in 1993 and ran street operations in the Inland Empire for La M, so his status was finally confirmed. He ended up getting involved in a domestic violence case with his girlfriend and caught a gun charge, which brought him back to prison on a parole violation. And that's when he caught his V number as in Victor 26050. He ended up being very controlling at Tehachapi State Prison and had a lot of camaradas and sureños working for him there, as well as other pintas. This guy was making a lot of feria, a lot of money. He even took over Artie Guzman taxes at Corcoran State Prison, but the majority of carnales were housed at Pelican Bay. I understand that he became greedy and would not send them nearly as much money as they expected while he was housed at Corcoran. He ended up having his inmate card pulled again and was labeled no good by 2014. I understand he was even stabbed by Tigre Salinas in 2020, who was another inmate member who fell from grace. Currently, Tutti is still housed at Pelican Bay State Prison. Well-known information, so I'm not giving away any secrets here. I'm just trying to give you a good short chronological brief on Tutti. There's a lot more they know. I'll probably have to do a special episode just on him and guys like Artie Guzman. Richard Joker Estrada was from LA. I show he had an H number, so would have been made MA sometime in the 1990s. He was released and came back with a P number, as in Paul. He also did some time in the federal system and was housed at Pelican Bay in 2012. I'm not sure what his status is right now. Roberto Jr. Estrada was also from LA. I don't know if he was related to Richard, aka Joker, but Jr. had a K number, and I'm not sure what happened to him either. Let me know if I left out any major guys so far, A through E. A is an alpha through E as in Edward. I may have them listed as not totally reliable information. Like I said, I tried to only put out guys that I'm pretty confident I got right. But hey, nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. So if you think I made one, please let me know, but do so respectfully. I appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.